or good morning, depending on where you're from. There's quite a lot of people signed up for today's webinar, so welcome everybody. So where should we start? If you've joined our webinars before, you might already know who I am. I'm Laura, and I head up customer success here at Coverage Book, and I am here with David, who's already said hi in the chat. He heads up customer support. So we run regular webinars here at Coverage Book. We run them probably about once a month for our existing customers, talking all things to do with the tool or reporting. But I know that we've got quite a few new faces here today because we extended the invite to some of you who've trialed Coverage Book before, because we were chatting through, and we know that now everyone's looking at the metrics that you might be using for 2026 and having a bit of a shake-up. So it's probably a good time just to run a bit of a session looking at these metrics and let you know what we think is in and what is out. So yep, hi loads of you, hi Sue, hi Craig. Nice to see you all chatting. Normally, actually, David does a lot of the chatting in these webinars, and you're going to hear more of my voice. David will be manning this chat, so do feel free to ask questions as you go along. He'll answer anything he can, or he will throw any questions my way at the end. So, you know, this session is planned for half an hour. I know how busy you lot are. And it will also be, so we try not to keep any more of your time than we need to. So I'll whiz through quite a few things, and we will send you the recording automatically after this. And if you have any questions, like I say, go type them in as you go along. And if not, just send us an email at support@coveragebook.com, and we're all more than happy to chat. So today we are having a look, like I said, at the metrics that you might want to use for 2026. And, you know, when I ask teams what metrics, why they're using the metrics that they're currently using, most people say it's because they are the ones that we have always used. And I understand that it's really hard to change them. First of all, it's uncomfortable challenging the norm, especially if you have been asked for by your end readers to use these metrics. But also, it makes it really hard for end readers to put your new report in context. You know, they might be used to these old metrics. They're used to what good looks like in terms of these old metrics and where they are. So new metrics does often mean that you have to teach new people new things, and it can be quite difficult, especially if you've got a long chain of people. So one tip I would say is, January is a good time to do it, because you can just say I'm starting afresh. Also, what I found is what a lot of teams do is keep the old reports in the old metrics, in the reports as a reference, but not mention them as much. So then people can sort of slowly move over to these newer metrics, but actually have some of that context in their mind, and you can slowly almost sort of phase them out. Another problem that I find people mention is that they find it hard to make year-on-year comparisons because you move it over to sort of newer metrics. But you can actually still make year-on-year comparisons. You can just be using the new metric formula in these year-on-year comparisons. So you don't worry, you haven't lost sort of old metrics. You can just move everything over. That said, I still understand it is hard to move them over, but yeah, January is a great time, which is why we wanted to run this now. So let's have a look. Before we look at what metrics we should be using, let's have a look at some of the metrics we should probably put to bed. So let's start with AVE. Everyone knows that it's flawed. But if you still use AVE, trust me, you are not alone. So many teams I speak to still ask us for AVE. And that's because their stakeholders are being asked them for an AVE. And effectively, what people are trying to do is they're trying to work out like a return on investment. So they spent X amount on this campaign. What did they get back? And AVEs mean like a traditional metric to try and work out and at least have a pound sign for that. But I think the problem is with AVE is there's the assumption that it's based on like publisher rate cards or agreed ad costs, as if someone had phoned up the publication and asked them what it would cost to buy that space. But in reality, a lot of platforms that give you an AVE is more of a rough sort of formula applied to a massive audience number with a few multipliers in there and given a value. If anyone follows AMIC, which is the Association for Measurement and Reporting, it's been banned for a reason, and it's because it is inconsistent and misleading. So let's drop it for 2026, but I do appreciate that that doesn't drop people asking for sort of a value metric. So I will hopefully have something that might help bridge that gap a bit later. So next on my hit list is this sort of potential audience. And so for this, it has many terms, many terms: reach, potential reach, overall audience. It could be unique visits, total visits. And that's part of the problem, is that it has so many different names, and all of those names mean something different. But the bigger problem actually lies in what you're trying to convey. It doesn't really matter whether you're looking at unique users or total users. What you're trying to say is, this many people visited the website where I got this piece of coverage. And I'm guessing I'm not alone in, no one genuinely believes if you've got a piece on MSN that your piece reached 200 million unique visits, unique people. It gives context, so it's good for positioning the types of publication where you're getting coverage from, but it doesn't, you're not saying this many people saw your coverage. And the bigger problem that this ends up having is when you roll it up in the report, it often ends up in the millions and the billions, and suddenly you're presenting a report which the entire population of 7 countries has seen, and that's not entirely what you're trying to say. Actually, it's just you start to use this big metric and it's being rolled up, and it's a metric everyone's used to. But once you report that, then if someone questions it, you start to lose credibility. If someone's saying, you really think that many people saw this coverage? And once they start losing credibility in parts of your report, they'll start losing it in other parts as well. So it takes quite a lot to step up and say, I'm not going to use these really big numbers. I'm going to use smaller ones, but you will be more credible for doing so. So let's have a look more. I guess there's 3 main metrics that I want to talk about today that we could use. So first of all, we're going to look at sort of estimated views. So we use a formula at Coverage Book to find how many people we think have seen your piece of coverage. So not how many people visit the website as a whole, but how many people we think will see this piece of coverage in its lifetime. So you're looking more at impressions. So how we do that is we look at the site-wide audience, so that bigger audience number. But then we put some formulas in place behind it. So again, if we look at that MSN figure, there's so many pages, that's why they have so many visits. But if you were on Gardeners Monthly and there were 5 pages, you would see a greater share of that traffic. We also look at how strong it is in Google, where it's placed on the site, and how many times that piece has been shared, to give you this overall sort of estimation of how many people we think will have seen the coverage. There's other platforms where you can get it exact. So if you're looking at YouTube, you can see how many times that video is being played, and there's some social platforms where you can see plays as well. So all of this brings you a number of sort of like coverage views. And yes, the estimation part might be a proxy, but at least you're trying to get something a bit more tangible. But there's a benefit in having this tangible number. So if you think about them as impressions, earlier on I mentioned getting rid of AVE, but still having sort of a cost associated to what you've done. What we have, if David, if you could pop in the chat, we have a whole host of free tools that you can use. So anyone can use these, whether they are a Coverage Book customer or not. So one of the free tools that we have is a CPM calculator. So that works out how much it costs for you to get 1,000 views of your how much it costs for you to get 1,000 views of your coverage effectively. So all you do is you pop in your total cost and then how many estimated views it had, press generated, and that will give you a CPM value. So this therefore will help your marketing department say, I spent X and got X money back. So if you're ditching the AVE, but you need to put a new sort of value on it, then that could be one way forward. So that's number one, is look at coverage views. But next, so we've gone from like the site-wide figures now to a much smaller number of how many people we think might have seen your coverage. But next, I'm going to go even smaller and have a look at engagements, because it's all very well how a journalist has written about your brand, but did anybody care? So a smaller number to even look at is, so how many engagements did you have? And that's another metric we do pull for you at Coverage Book. And it often is a very small number. So last year, we looked at over 5 million coverage URLs to have a look to see at what is good in terms of like engagements. We looked at lots of things, but engagements was one of them. And 67% of all pieces of coverage don't have any shares whatsoever. So this means if your coverage has been shared, you're in the top percentage of coverage URLs, so it's good. More importantly, if your coverage has more than 10 shares, you're in the top 20% of all the coverage that have been added to Coverage Book. So you know that, like, if you said you've had a piece of coverage and it's been shared 15 times, that's good, and that's worth celebrating. It's a much smaller number than those 400 million at the very beginning, but you get looking at more tangible metrics about how many people might have actually seen your piece of coverage, done something with your piece of coverage. You've moved them to action. Talking about sharing your coverage, if your coverage is shared, the only bit of it that gets shared is the title and the open graph. So even if it was shared, you'd want to be mentioned in that title. But more importantly, and it depends on which study you look at, but I think somewhere between 60 and 80% of people get their news from the internet don't read past the headline. So this leads into some analysis that you might want to do to see if your brand was in the headline. So obviously everyone's attention spans are getting smaller and smaller, and so it's more important than ever to get the brand in the headline. And this is super easy to do, again, whether you use Coverage Book or not. If you do use Coverage Book, you can just pull through, download your Excel sheet, and one of the columns is title, and then you can see, you can do filter to just filter through all the ones that mention your brand. If you don't use Coverage Book, I'm sure that you still have a coverage tracker. The tracker, you probably still have title in one of your columns, and you can do the same. So have a look and maybe pull out how many times your brand's been mentioned in the headline. That's quite a good metric to be looking at the moment as well. So they're the three main metrics I think will be popular for this year. But I would also like, in an ideal world, to see people looking more at the impact of your coverage. So this could be sales, web visits, brochure downloads. Every sector is different. Now, that's much easier said than done. I've seen so many talks and you say, oh, you just correlate it to this. And that's, I would say for most people, almost impossible. Like whether it's your sales funnel is much bigger, you don't have access to that data, you're quite small in the whole marketing mix, and you can't prove that it was you because there were some bigger voices somewhere else. So I am aware that it's just not as easy saying look at your coverage and see the impact related to sales. But again, on that free tools page, we hopefully have something that can help. So this graph is made by using coverage impact. And what you do, again, I do the two camps. If you are a coverage book user, download your CSV of the campaign you're looking at, and you can just drop that CSV in, and we'll make this sort of blue bar chart for you. If you're not a coverage book user, as long as you've got a CSV with dates and your coverage next to it, we can still create this graph for you. So no, we can't see your impact timeline straight away, but what we will do is start to pull through this sort of bar chart for you. In some cases, that's good enough to open up some conversations and say, this is how our coverage landed. Did you see any impact in sort of the sales or anything that you're seeing? But personally, what I find even more interesting with this, and I think is relatable for more brands, is actually looking at Google Trends data. So I don't know how many of you know Google Trends, but in terms of like someone reading your coverage, you would think the next common step, obviously not for everything, but a common next step is then to Google the brand, the product, whatever it is that you are getting out there. And so what Google Trends can do is you can see if people are searching for that over time. Coverage impact works really well with Google Trends. So you could put in, say, for example, you were working on the launch of Super Mario Wonder. Type that in, choose the dates where you're looking at your coverage, choose the location that you're getting the coverage in. It gives you a CSV. And then you pop that into coverage impact, and we all draw the line on top of it. And how great would it be if your line of coverage went like that and the trends data went like that? You can see that you've moved people to therefore search for your brand. I could do, or I have done, whole webinars on coverage impact because it's quite a big and fascinating tool. If you have a look on our on coveragebook.com and look at webinars, you'll see I've done one specifically on using coverage impact and Google Trends. Like I say, you don't have to be a coverage book customer, so check that out if you want to see more about coverage impact. And then the next is less about metrics, and these on quite nicely from the coverage impact graph, is using more storytelling. So in terms of what I do, I see a lot of reports, all full of numbers, and I wouldn't be able to tell you whether that's good or bad because I don't know what you were aiming for and I don't know what the activity was. And you might be sending your report to your close contact and they understand your objectives. They understood that halfway through the whole team had to pivot to go on a reactive piece and you did that instead of finishing this campaign. And they might know the event that you put on and whether it was good or bad. But these reports can be passed on to other people who don't know that. Or you might think your first, your initial reader remembers that, but they might not in that day. So I think it's really crucial to not only just pull the metrics that you've got, but I'm really hoping that in using Coverage Book, we free up lots more time that you can do a lot of the so what. So you can use a lot of metrics in this. So we got 20 pieces of coverage and the target was 10. Actually puts that 20 in a lot different number. So you can use metrics in this to create lots of stories. We had one event, 200 signups, 3 sales. You know, if it's a big value sale, that might be really good. So use your objectives as metrics excuse me, within your report to be able to tell some of the stories. And the other thing to do is then start pulling out, which were your best performing pieces, which campaigns or which stories did best, maybe in terms of this story got the most amount of coverage, or this type of story got the most engagements, this type of story got our brand in the headline more. Start having a look and seeing the different activities that your team did. And I'm hoping that, because all the numbers are automatic, you've got that time to pull it apart and say, this, we should do more along these lines. We should pitch more to this type of media. This looked really well. You did really well. So now you've got in your report, you've got the very beginning of like, these are our objectives. This is what we got. And then this is what we're doing next. So yeah, in Coverage Book, the best ones I see use loads of metrics cards to do that, as well as slides. So I know most people didn't go into PR to create coverage reports, but we're hoping we can automate the boring part, that you can think about telling that story as you're putting these reports together and use your creative flair, which I know you all have, and that's why you're in PR. And then I can't do any webinar nowadays without touching on AI. Otherwise, everybody will ask, what do you think about AI? And whether you're actively using or not, I'm sure you're being asked, should we be using AI in our reporting? So I thought I'd share my 2 pence worth. And I think AI can be really useful in like summarizing reports, spotting patterns, even helping draft commentary around results, some of that storytelling stuff that I was mentioning. But the main thing is it's only as good as the data that you feed it. So if you have all your numbers in like 5 different spreadsheets and 3 different tools and a presentation here and there, AI is not going to be able to read this. And worse, you just get really confident nonsense back. Excuse me. So if you want to start using AI this year, I think the first thing is to get all of your metrics all in one place. So they all have like, one single source of truth. Everything's using the same data source. Everything's structured in the same consistent way. And when you've got that, then you should be able to let AI models then help you along the way. So I think that concludes what I was going to say. I can see there's lots in the chat. So if I can pick up some of the questions. Are they all you, David? So Karen says, on point 2 engagement, what do you mean by coverage being shared? So what we can see is we use BuzzSumo, and we can see how many times that URL has then been shared on different social channels. So that's what we have a look at in terms of things being shared. I can see lots.
I think that's it in terms of questions. I just posted lots of links to things like the free tools and the things that we were looking at, and also the webinar as well.
Perfect. I'll wait a little longer in case there's any more questions. I left a little 5 minutes for any more questions. I whiz through that. Like I said, the recording of this will be sent afterwards. Sorry, how do you spell the tool you just mentioned to respond? BuzzSumo. David, if you can pop that in the chat.
Yeah, sure.
That's where we get some of our data from. Yes, this will be emailed around afterwards. And if you have any questions, if you come off this and you're like, oh, actually, I should have asked that, I'm always up for chatting about Coverage Book and measurement. You can get me at laurajoint@coveragebook.com. Nima, thank you for your time as well. No problem, Paul. So, lots of thank yous. All right. So I think that might be us for us. Thank you, everyone.